Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the European Information Days of the LIFE program, edition 2024. The LIFE program is the only EU funding scheme that is entirely dedicated to the environment and climate action. It is managed by CINEA, the executive agency of the European Commission for Climate, Infrastructure and Environment. My name is Eva Paparatti, and I am working as a project advisor and the call coordinator at CINEA. And I'm welcoming you here to the first day of these information days, which will see a lot of presentations, of course, on the calls for proposals. As you may know, last week, in fact, we published all the calls for proposals for LIFE funding. They can be found all in the Funding and Tender Opportunities portal of the European Commission, where you will find all the calls and all the application forms to apply for LIFE funding. However, we have organized this event in order to make sure that everybody can join online and get all the information. Here you will find everything you need to know in order to apply and have the best chances to see your project selected and funded through LIFE. So I will already ask you to join us via Slido. In fact, Slido is the tool that we are going to use throughout these 4 days for two main purposes. We will use Slido to get your questions. In fact, at the end of each session, there will be time for questions and answers. And we will also use Slido to ask you at the end of each session what you think about this session if you got all the information you needed. So please already join us by typing slido.com on your mobile phone, or you can also scan the QR code. And this is the first ice-breaking poll we have. This is our first question on Slido would be, is this your first EU LIFE program session? Is this the first time you join the EU LIFE Information Days? Please go on Slido and answer the question so that we know how many newcomers we have present today. I think we have more than 1,500 people registered for this session, and we would like to see how many of you have already participated, and we want to make sure that everybody can join on Slido. So this is the this is our first Slido poll. I see that there are lots of newcomers, but also a lot of experienced lifers. So welcome to you all. And let's now have a look at the agenda of these 4 days. So today is the first day of the EU LIFE Information Days. We will start with a general introduction on the LIFE program and on the calls for proposals of this year that were published last week on the Funding and Tender Opportunities portal of the European Commission. We will first have a general overview with some tips on how to prepare a good proposal. And then we will go more into details about the application and evaluation processes. Then we will have, after the coffee break, a first question and answer session. And in the afternoon, we will have 2 presentations on 2 calls, which are the call for proposals for strategic integrated projects and strategic nature projects, and the call for proposals for technical assistance replication projects. Tomorrow, Tuesday, we will look at the calls for proposals for standard action projects under 3 subprograms of LIFE, which are climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, circular economy and quality of life, and nature and biodiversity. On day 3, that's Thursday, we will dive into the calls for proposals for clean energy transition. And on the 4th day, we will present you the calls for proposals for operating grants for non-profit making entities. Well, I would like to already let you know that this last session is a bit special because this call for proposals for NGOs has very strict eligibility criteria. So as I see there are many people registered there, I would like to tell the persons who are going to participate, please, before you apply, make sure that you have read carefully the eligibility criteria, because you have to make sure that you are eligible for this call. And please remember that you are, as an NGO, you can apply for many other calls, not only for the operating grants. So just to remind you, there will be a lot of time for questions and answers, but there are very simple rules to remember when you join on Slido. You have to, first of all, make sure that you're in the right session, and you still have time to register. You can still register to any of the sessions that you can see here on the screen. And when you ask a question, please first make sure that you ask it in the right session. And before even you ask the question, we would ask you to carefully listen to the presentation, because you might have a lot of information in the presentation that could even already answer some of your questions. And then, even before you ask a question, we would advise you to check if the question has already been asked. And if so, we would advise you to like the question, because questions will be ranked by the number of likes they get. Therefore, the more a question gets likes, and the quicker it will be treated by us. So please, before you ask a question, check if it's already there and like the question. We would also like to remind you that this event is entirely recorded, and therefore you will be able to listen to the recordings in the next days following the event. They will be published on the live YouTube channel. They will be published also on the live website and on the website of this event where you have registered. You can also find all the presentations, all the slides of these events on the live website, and also on the event website. We would also like to remind you that you have the possibility to meet other potential applicants. And this you can do by preparing first carefully inserting your profile on the platform, and then proposing meetings to other potential applicants. And this would allow you to prepare for partnerships and consortia in order to apply together and to increase your chances to get funding through LIFE. So now I would like to move to the agenda of today, please. Can I have the slide? Thank you. So more in detail, today we will start with the general introduction of the LIFE program and the calls for proposals 2024, just after a welcome message by Anne Burrell, head of unit, CINEA Life Environment. And then Anne will be joined by Hans Rein, head of unit of the CINEA Life Energy and Climate Life, Life Energy and Life Climate Unit. Then our colleague Bernd Decker will give us a presentation on the application process and the evaluation. Then our colleague Licinia will go more into the details of the financial aspects of a proposal. And then after the coffee break, we will have a first question and answer session using Slido. After the lunch break, the afternoon will be dedicated to calls for proposals for strategic projects and calls for proposals for technical assistance replication projects. We will also have, of course, a question and answer session. So for after every presentation. So don't worry, you will have time to send your questions and get your answers. But now, without further ado, I would call our colleague Anne Burrell, Head of Unit SINEA Life Environment, for the welcome message. Thank you, Anne. Hello.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Eva. It's certainly a great pleasure for me to be here to welcome you to this year's Life Info Days. Normally, the opening would be done by Annetta Williams, who's our head of department in SINEA. However, she's on extended leave, so I'm opening this on her behalf. As Eva has said, my name is Anne Burrell. I'm head of one of the 2 units in SINEA with responsibility for implementing the LIFE program. Before turning to talking about LIFE per se, I'd like to just give you a brief overview of what SINEA is and what we do. SINEA is one of the 6 executive agencies established by the European Commission. We manage in total 7 different EU financing programs with a total delegated budget of more than 65 billion euro for the period 2021 to 2027. Overall, in SINEA, we identify ourselves as the Green Deal Agency because our programs work towards a greener, more sustainable Europe. In addition to LIFE, SINEA's programs include the Innovation Fund, relevant parts of the Horizon Europe program, and the Connecting Europe Facilities Energy and Mobility program, as well as some other programs. Beyond the impact of our individual programs in SINEA, we aim to establish synergies among the different programs to try to ensure that our EU financing has as large and coherent an impact as possible. So, for instance, in the LIFE program, we've established strong ties with the European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund, which is the program providing support for the implementation of the common fisheries policy and the Union's maritime policy. It has a centrally managed component, which is one of the programs that's implemented by SINEA. So to give you an example of what I mean by the synergies, for tackling marine litter, LIFE has supported already back in 2014 a project of about 1 million called Ghost Life. This was followed up then in 2019 by a project under the MFAF program worth about 600,000 euro. And now it's going to be followed up by yet another project under the Horizon program, a project called Maelstrom, which is worth about 9 million euro. So we try to ensure that our programs work coherently and that we give support for the various different themes and challenges that we're trying to address through the European Green Deal. I would certainly invite you to visit the SINEA webpage where you can find many more details of all of our programs. You can also consult on the SINEA website our online public dashboard. This is a tool that allows everyone to find information about all of the different EU-funded projects that are supported by SINEA, and you'll find this data visualization and some graphs, and we're developing some maps that will be increasingly informative in the future. So if you're interested in knowing about the funding opportunities overall from SINEA and what's open at the moment, please do look on our website, look at our dedicated page there on call for proposals, where you can get an overview of all of the ongoing calls for proposals across the programs managed by SINEA. Of course, you can also look directly on the EU funding and portals, funding and tender portal. So With those brief words about SINEA, I'd now like to turn specifically to the LIFE program, because that's why you're here with us today. And as mentioned by Eva, I'm going to be joined by my colleague Hans Rijn, who's the head of our sister unit. And we will take you through an overview of the LIFE calls, the LIFE program. Of course, across the next 4 days, you're going to get a lot more details. So we're certainly not going to give you all of the nitty gritty in our introduction, but I think it's useful to have a general overview. So the LIFE program is not something new, and as many of you probably already know, we're 32 years young at the moment, hopefully with another 32 years at least ahead of us. We're the only program that the EU has which is entirely dedicated to environment, nature, and climate action, including energy transition. We're therefore really a program that's at the core of the European Green Deal. Of course, we don't do all of the implementation of the European Green Deal through our program. There are lots of other programs that contribute also to the European Green Deal, but we have a special position really to kickstart, catalyze, demonstrate, and address some very key challenges that Europe and our society is facing. So over the period 2021 to 2027, which is what we call the present multi-annual financial framework, LIFE has a budget of 5.43 billion. The various calls that we have launched for this year amount to a total of 571 million euro. And as we go through, you'll kind of see the distribution of that budget across the different calls. What can I say overall about the program? Well, as I said, it's dedicated entirely to the European Green Deal. We're implemented through 4 subprograms, which we'll talk about in a little more detail now. But all of these subprograms aim to contribute to promoting a sustainable, circular, energy efficient, renewable energy, nature-based, and climate resilient economy. We are very closely linked to all of the policy objectives of our parent DGs. So it's DG Environment, DG Klima, and the DG for Energy. And we aim to support in different ways all of the policy objectives of the policies managed by those services. So we have different types of projects, and we'll talk about them a bit more. But as I say, overall, our goal is to support the development, monitoring, and implementation of EU environment and climate policy. We aim to provide models of solutions, models that can be upscaled and copied across Europe. We have some projects that are really demonstrative projects. We have some that help to implement plans, some that really just promote best practices and behavioral change. And a lot of our projects aim to catalyze a large-scale deployment of successful solutions. Our beneficiaries are equally spread across private enterprise, NGOs, and public authorities. So any legal entity in the EU is eligible to apply. Only private individuals cannot. Next slide, please. So we're going to touch now on each of the subprograms. The first subprogram I'd mention is the Nature and Biodiversity subprogram. The overall goal of this subprogram is to contribute to halting and reversing biodiversity loss across our continent. We support the implementation of Natura 2000 network and its prioritized action frameworks, but we also work beyond the Natura 2000 network on other types of environment, of biodiversity and nature objectives, for instance, the eradication of invasive alien species, and working towards protecting species even if they're not in Natura 2000 areas. We also aim to promote mainstreaming of nature and biodiversity objectives into other policies and other financial programs. So we have various different types of projects that do this that we'll speak about later, but maybe it's just worth noting here that one thing that's ongoing now, but we don't have a separate call for, is that we have a small grants program working the overseas countries and territories and outermost regions of the EU. So life actually does extend beyond the continental EU into some of our further flung areas where we have lots of nature and biodiversity. Next slide, please. So our second subprogram I want to mention is the subprogram on circular economy and quality of life. That title's a bit of a mouthful, but basically it's all of the environment policy except nature and biodiversity. So this subprogram covers objectives related to water, related to soil, related to plastics, related to industrial emissions, water management, all really of the other EU environment policy areas. We give support, again, both to public authorities and private entities here. A lot of the projects under this subprogram aim to support technologies and solutions that have already been shown to have potential in research labs. We don't finance research, we go to show how actually it works out in the real world.
Very warm welcome from my side. I'm the head of unit for climate action and energy, managing these two sub-programs of the LIFE program. So let me maybe quickly introduce the sub-program for climate action, or specifically for climate mitigation and adaptation. This is a program that was integrated into the LIFE program back in 2014 and seeks to support the transformation of the European Union into a climate neutral and a fully climate resilient society. We look for actions across the board that target basically two aspects that we urgently need to address. One of them are in the area of climate change mitigation in particular. So all actions that seek to actually reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And the other big and growing area of work that we would like to support through this sub-program is specifically to address climate change adaptation and all the related governance related aspects of climate change challenges. Maybe more concretely, what we look for the two areas of intervention here. So for climate mitigation, we look at projects that contribute significantly to our 2030 energy and climate policies to really make a difference in reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the various areas. So we look both at projects that introduce new innovative technologies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also programs that really try to roll out climate action across the field. And we are looking at all types of actors, both civil society actors, but also companies, small and medium enterprises, but also governmental actors. We also seek here to support, in particular, the national energy and climate plans, so their implementation at member state level, and also, in particular, the objectives to achieve the mid-century long-term climate and energy strategies. On climate adaptation, we look at a wide range of projects that intervene, whether that is in forestry or agriculture, or in urban areas. So I mean, it's a wide range of programs that seek to address the consequences of climate change in the EU. And as I said, this is a growing area. They seek to specifically support the national adaptation plans that member states have drawn up in the context of our climate policies. Next slide, please. To maybe quickly introduce the subprogram on clean energy transition. It is a program that was a subprogram that was integrated more recently in the LIFE family. It follows up on the Horizon 2020 energy efficiency market uptake programs, and this is a key program that looks to support directly the implementation of our key directives in the energy field, namely the energy efficiency directives, the energy performance in buildings directive, and the renewable energy directive. So it seeks to fill the gaps that are there between policy development and implementation. And I think a lot of focus in this call, but also in the future calls, will be exactly on the implementation now that we have updated our directives in this area, set new targets and new ambitions in this area. The key objectives really what we are seeking in terms of projects there. We're looking at projects that seek to break market barriers, to change the markets and the regulatory fundamentals. So all the regulatory environment to support the clean energy transition, to improve more widely governance and capacity across the board, whether that is supporting companies or local authorities. We support the skill areas. We seek to support also, and that again will be a much more important aspect of our future work, is to seek really to find and attract the private finance into the clean energy transition. We seek to all kinds of programs that support our engagement with citizens and consumers. And that includes also actions on addressing energy poverty. And lastly, we look at supporting both local and regional authorities in the challenging work and on drawing up also local plans and local implementation solutions for the clean energy transition. And I'll stop here and I'll pass back to you, Anne, for the next slides.
Yes, thank you very much, Hans. So we've now given you an overview thematically about how the LIFE program is structured. I would like to turn now on the next slide to an overview of the different types of projects that we finance. Over these 4 days, you're going to get detailed information about each of these types of projects, but it's very important to know which is most appropriate for the kind of activities that you want to undertake. So I think it's important to get the key differences between the projects understood right from the beginning, and that will help orientate you to which sessions you should be going to. So next slide, please. I'd like to start talking about the strategic projects. These are big projects that finance work aiming towards the full implementation of a specific set of strategies and plans. They're set out in the call documents, so we'll be described more in the other sessions. But you may not apply for this project unless you're targeting one of these eligible plans. To give examples, it might be a climate plan, it might be a river basin management plan, it might be an alien invasive species plan under the Nature and Biodiversity subprogram. But these projects must aim towards the implementation of these programs. They must include the mobilization of complementary finance from other sources, so other funding sources. And they, in the case of the strategic nature projects, they must include activities to mainstream the nature and biodiversity objectives into other policy areas. These are very big projects. They take about 10 years normally to be implemented. And they really have a lot of activity on coordinating different actions that take place under the different complementary funds, but also there are core actions that are undertaken inside the LIFE project itself. Next slide, please. In contrast to the strategic projects, our standard action projects are much more flexible. They're really very much bottom-up proposals. We do have a list of topics that you'll find in the call documents. But there's a much broader scope here. So if you have some kind of specific project you want to do related to one of the areas of environment or climate policy, this is probably the area that you want to be looking into. These may be demonstrative projects on the ground. They may be projects for undertaking concrete conservation actions in the field. We also have a subset of projects under this that are related to governance and improving environment and climate governance in Europe. These projects are a somewhat shorter application process. You may have noticed under strategic projects, we talked about a two-stage process where you first submit a concept note and then a full application. Standard action projects, it's one stage. You put in an application, it's evaluated, and it is selected or not. This is the type of project we've been running for decades already. In the past, including last year, it only covered the first 3 subprograms listed there. This year, there's going to be a pilot call for standard action projects also under the Clean Energy Transition Program. Next slide, please. The third type of project I want to mention are the technical assistance projects for replication. This is a new type of project under this financial framework. We ran the first call last year. These are not standard action projects. These are projects to provide some kind of technical assistance to helping the beneficiaries to prepare for the upscaling and replication of results from previous projects. It does not mean a one-to-one replication. It means working to overcome some kind of structural barrier or obstacle that is preventing the wide-scale replication of the results. We know that we've got lots and lots of excellent LIFE projects or projects from similar environment programs in the past that perhaps have not been replicated to the scale that we think they should be. We see lots of potential for more uptake and use of LIFE results, and we ask ourselves why, and we know there are various potential obstacles to this replication, and these technical assistance projects are designed to try to help overcome those obstacles. Next slide, please. We have another type of technical assistance. This is what we call technical assistance for project preparation, TAPP. This is specifically designed to assist in the preparation of applications for strategic projects. These are fairly small projects, but always aimed towards the development of an application for a strategic project. Next, please. I now would mention our PLP projects, the policy and legislative priority projects. You'll recall under the standard action projects, I said the scope is very broad. It really covers almost all of the policy areas of the EU in environment and climate. On the contrary, for the PLP projects, these are very specific topics. They're different each year. They're projects asking to address some specific need that the Commission has identified. So you have a look at these. In general, we are normally only going to be financing one project under each topic because we want one solution to whatever the issue is. So have a look at these, but these are much more restrictive topics. So you should only apply to this if you really are aiming to address the specific challenge or policy request that's addressed in the call. And finally, from my side, I would mention on the next slide the operating grants for the NGOs. Eva already hinted a bit about them. These are grants that are given to European scale NGOs, so non-governmental organizations that are active in at least 3 EU countries and which are active in the area of EU environment and climate and energy transition policy. These operating grants are given on the basis of what we call framework partnership agreements. The framework partnership agreement call is being launched this year and will cover the next 2 fiscal years. In parallel, the call for the specific grant agreement for the 2025 financial year is also being launched or has been launched. The entities which are successful under the framework partnership agreement call, their specific grant agreement application will also be examined, but only for those entities where the FPA has been approved. Hans, I turn back to you to speak a little bit about the coordination support activities and then give everyone some more general information about the calls and what they should take into account if they're trying to develop applications. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, so the last type of action that the regulation foresees is called is under other actions, and they are called coordination and support actions. This is the main type of support for the Life Clean Energy Transition program, and it's still very much a bottom-up approach, and so we seek really to have proposals coming here that look at innovative solutions for the different clean energy transition actions, but they're probably slightly more prescriptive, and we have in this year's call some 14 topics that will be covered. And just to give you an idea here on the areas of interventions that we are looking at. So, I mean, one of the areas of intervention is to build both a national, regional, and local policy framework. So, supporting the implementation of energy and climate action plans at local level or regional level, to supporting specifically the energy transition in buildings. We are also looking at trying to support action and to support actions that look in particular at heating and cooling and the decarbonization of our heating and cooling systems, to also support businesses in helping them in supporting the clean energy transition and their companies as well. I mentioned already before that we're looking at the whole area of skills and how to ensure that the building professionals have the skills necessary to implement the renovation wave. We look at directly supporting with our projects as well investments at local and regional level, so programs that support one-stop shops, but also investment programs to renovate buildings. And as I said already, we are also covering the areas of private finance and energy poverty, and more generally the specific topic of supporting energy communities. We have about 77 million euros for this particular type of action foreseen in this call. as part of the overall 81 million for the clean energy transition. What is maybe particular to mention here is that the co-funding rate for this type of action is higher than for the other programs, as we are supporting the actions with 95% of co-financing. So that is important. And I think I will stop here. As you see, the application and submission deadlines is the same as for the other main calls, and it's a one-stage procedure for this call. Let me now, next slide, please, provide you 3 slides to summarize a little bit what Anne and myself have said over the last 15-20 minutes, and give you the overall overview of the different calls that were opened last Thursday. So you have here on this first slide the what I would say the core of our calls, so the standard action program and the coordination and support actions that we will be supporting in the different sub-programs. As said, the overall call, it has 571 million euros of funding, and you will see that here the core of the budget is allocated to these standard action programs and coordination support action. You will note also that for the closing date for the standard action programs for climate mitigation and adaptation is slightly in advance of the others, so do take note of that. Next slide, please. Introduced already as part of the types of action that we support the strategic integrated projects. For this, we will have this year a total of 150 million euros to support between 10 and 20 projects in the different sub areas, the strategic nature projects, circular economy and quality of life projects, and strategic integrated projects in climate mitigation and adaptation. As Anne has mentioned, these calls have a two-phase approach. So the concept note will be due on the 5th of September, and the final proposal stage for those that have been selected from the concept note stage will be in March 2025, with an indicative signature for the grant agreement in October 2025. Next slide. So very quickly, the support programs and calls that have been opened last Thursday. So Anne mentioned already the specific policy and legislative priorities projects for which there's 10.5 million allocated under this call. We have the technical assistance project preparation projects, the replication projects, and as said by Anne, the NGO operating grants program, for which we have allocated slightly more than 14 million euros in indicative budget this year, and again, for which you have 2 closing dates, so for the framework agreement and for the specific grant agreement on the 5th of September, on the 17th of September this year. Let me now turn, next slide please, and give you some hints of what we think is important to bear in mind when you apply, and to make sure that you can be applying successfully. Next slide, please. I think, first of all, you should bear in mind that this is an open call. All these calls are open, and there's a significant competition for life funds under each of these calls. We have very high ratios of projects received compared to the number of projects that we can fund with the indicative budgets that were shown before. So you must really make sure that your proposal are very well prepared and that they are really looking at trying to be innovative and successful. Maybe from my side, a few things that I think is important to bear in mind if you want to have a successful project. So, I mean, preparation is very important. You should also be sure that you are staying within the scope of the call, and make sure that you are applying to the right call for the type of proposals that you're looking for. And please do remember to respect the formatting instructions that are on the first page of the application form strictly, and do not try to meddle with both fonts, because in the end all this will be disregarded, and if you are going beyond the indicative length of proposals, the evaluators will not be able to see specifically the remaining pages that go above the page limit. And lastly, I mean, be ambitious in your projects, both at describing and looking for significant impact for the different areas, and looking for innovation. Next slide, please. So we recommend that you do carefully look already at what we have funded in the past in the different core areas and under the different sub-programs. You can find the whole list of live projects that have been funded or are currently ongoing under our website. So that is, I think, very instructive in terms of understanding the type of projects that will be supported. Look at specifically also at the funding and tender opportunities portal, because there's a lot of useful information there. Lastly, you should certainly read both the life regulation and the multi-annual work program that has been adopted and which are the legal bases for the call that we are publishing at the moment. Lastly, you have national contact points, sometimes several national contact points for the different sub-programs in your member states. So do look out as well for the guidelines that national contact points might have issued, and it's always a good recommendation to be in contact with your national contact points on your applications. I have a few more slides to present, and I'll go very quickly through them, just on some tips and hints of what to make sure when you're designing a project in order to be successful. So very important is that you have a very clear description of where your starting point is, so basically the baseline for your project, as well as a logical sequence of actions that you propose to address the problems that have been identified. You should also make sure that you have very clear and realistic expected results for the project impacts. So that is very important. These are all the aspects that will be looked at by the evaluators when they look at the award criteria specifically, which are referred to indicatively in brackets here after each of the points. You have to have clear plans also to ensure sustainability, very important, so that the project results can be maintained after the project end. So very important to put a strong emphasis on that, to have clear ideas and strategies of how your projects can be taken up by others and possibly replicated, as well as a clear description of beneficiaries involved at all stages, both project design, project implementation, but also describing the different impacts that your project will have on the different stakeholders in the projects. And lastly, one more slide, please. Make sure that you have a coherent description and output in part B and in your work packages. Be sure that your partnership structure is clear and that you really have included in your project partners that are essential for the implementation of the project, but which also avoids duplication, that your project duration takes good account of sufficient time to gather information about impact of the projects. Where that is the case, and that is probably more for standard action programs, that you also take into account any authorizations and permits needed, and that you also take into account a buffer of time for unexpected events. Please make sure that you have a clear communications strategy included, because that is important. We have platform meetings that bring together projects and networking events among projects, and that is an important point for the outreach and communication activities that we do. So to summarize in our last slide, what is a good design of a project? You have to have a full and solid analysis of the problem. You have to have key stakeholder involvement ensured. You have to have a robust assessment of the impacts. Please change the slide as well. And you have to have a clear strategy on how to sustain and multiply the impacts. I'm not going to go through the individual common problems that we look at, but you have them here on the right side. So do carefully look at them, because these are typical issues that we see and our evaluators see when they are looking at the project proposals. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll pass back to Anne for the closing words.
Okay, thank you very much, Hans. Just to say thank you to everyone for listening to us. Both Hans and I will be back at 11:45 for the question and answer session, so you can ask us questions at that time. But I hope this has given you an overview of how life is structured thematically, of the types of projects that we support, and therefore which sessions you want to attend during these info days, and Hans's very useful hints on some of the things that you need to think about in putting together an application. So I will hand back to our moderator now. Eva?
Yes.
Take us
Thank
through
you,
the rest
Anne.
of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Hans, for this general overview of the different calls, which was general but also very comprehensive. We think that we gave an idea of all the opportunities that we have here for our future applicants, and that we will see many of them at the different sessions of the different calls for proposals. But now I would first call the next speaker, Bernd Decker. But before that, I just would like to remind you, because we receive a lot of questions on where would we find the slides and the recordings. Don't worry, because all the recordings will be available on the live YouTube channel, and also on the live website, and on the platform where you registered for this event. And you will find all the material, all the slides, and all the recordings there. So don't worry in case you miss any of these presentations, any of these sessions. As of next week, they always will publish there, so you will find them easily. Now, I would like to call our colleague Bernd Decker, Head of Sector Climates at CINEA, to give us a presentation on the application process and the evaluation process. Bernd, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Hi, Bernd. Please take the floor.
So I will present with this presentation the application process and selection of proposals for standard action projects. Um, those are the majority of our projects. So I would like to focus here a little bit. And I would like to do this with a hypothetical example or case. Imagine among the audience is a director of a hospital, local hospital, communal hospital in, let's say, in Croatia, a town in Croatia, maybe Koprivnica could be one example. Anyone present from Koprivnica? I mean, there are many newcomers. Maybe one of that little town in Croatia is among you. Maybe even a director of a hospital. Well, during last year, there was an extreme heat wave in the summer, and the director of the hospital was confronted with a sharp increase of patients suffering from severe heat stress. Tragically, one person even died of the excessive heat, and the director said, we have to do something. We have to combat this apparent change of climate. And he had a dinner with the mayor and raised this issue with her, and told her that that he was participating in the Live Info Day. And there he heard that there would be money available for actions to combat the effects of climate change, for example. And he even learned that there was a priority on health and climate in this program. So you will hear about that in more detail tomorrow. The mayor was very enthusiastic and shouts, we built public water fountains and request the money from life. So next slide, please. So they opened, of course, a bottle of champagne because of this fantastic idea. But they soon realized that was far too early to open this expensive bottle, because suddenly they realized that there were all kinds of different questions. What should we write in a proposal? Can the national government help, because life is only contributing 60%? Who should participate in such a project? What do we want to achieve with such a project at all? Can we quantify something, because they were talking about indicators and about impact? And by when should we have something, because it can take long time with certain measures. So a plan needs to be developed, and so they start reading all the documents and proposals which were mentioned during this info day. So we go to the next slide. So the access you heard already is the central access or obvious access for all calls for proposals are is the European Commission funding and tender portal. You will find all the information there for making an application. And I will just provide with the next two slides a short teaser of what you find more or less in this access, or what would be your entry point. Next slide, please. So you will have to find the respective call and the right call. I mean, yes, you can try with Google, but you have to make sure that Google provides you also with the right entry. Make sure on the left side that you have the right period selected, that you select the right program. And you will find it under program for the environment. So it does not start with life. So that can be a little bit confusing. Underneath, you will then have the 4 subprograms listed, for which you then have to make the choice, which would be the right one. In this case, with the example of the director, and he was asking the consultant to carefully study the content of the site, and by looking into the various topics, they say, okay, we will select a climate change adaptation for this, for resolving the problem which we have in our city. Next slide, please. I only see colorful stripes. So this is, of course, not the funding and tender portal. Can we just see the slides, please?
The technical service should put on the slides. Ah, there they are.
One slide back, please. Yes. Thank you. So
Thanks.
when you click on the, for example, on one topic, and this is equal to all the other subprograms, so you select your topic, and you will see on the left side the internal navigation. And the internal navigation provides you with general information, when the opening date was, and very important, when the deadline date is. And please note that for climate action, it's the 17th of September, while the others are, the submission is on the 19th of September 2024. Due to technical reasons, we had to choose that particular date for the climate action. Then you have the topic description, and in the topic description you find already base information where you can assess whether your call is or your project idea would fit under this. And as mentioned, you will find as a new priority health and climate. Then you have the topic conditions and the documents. You have a partner search possibility. Then a start button for the submission, topic question and answers, how to get support. And in the topic conditions and documents, this is the place where you find the call document and where you find the part B of the application form. The application form, I will refer to this a bit later. So next slide, please. So the call document, we have for each call per year a call document, one per life subprogram. And the call documents, next slide, please, is a common structure. And I would like to have with you together a look at the common structure of the call document. I assume that many of you have already downloaded the call document, had a look in the call document, but seeing that a third of the participants are new to live, first time in this info day, I think it's important to look at the content. The next slides, please. Thank you. So we have the introduction in the call document, where you have the background on the live program, where you can assess whether your idea really fits to the live program, and whether it fits to one of the 4 subprograms which were mentioned in the previous presentation. Then the second chapter describes the type of the actions, the objectives, the themes. This is where the topics and the priorities are described. And this is the important part, particularly for those ones who have participated in the live program already, or participated in info days from the last year. We have changes in the call document for this year. Certain areas of intervention have been updated to follow the updates of the policies. This will be presented tomorrow to you. I just wanted to highlight to you where to find this information. Please make a click so that we see the topics and the priorities highlighted again. Then the third chapter is the available budget, what we have for this call, chapter 4, the timetable and the deadlines. Then we have information about the admissibility and the required documents, the eligibility of participants, the consortium composition, eligible activities, geographical location. We have a 7th chapter on the financial operational capacity and exclusion. Important also to read, particularly after having listened to the following presentation by the colleague Lisinia. We also disclose the evaluation and the award procedure so that you have an idea of how do we assess a proposal and how do we award the individual chapters of your proposal. Next slide, please. And then you have further information about the legal and financial setup of the grant agreements, starting date, how to put milestones and deliverables, the form of the grant, what are the liabilities for recoveries, for I mean, all kind of administrative aspects. And also here, I recommend you really to read well this chapter to make sure that you really can comply with this, and that the mayor of this example will find the majority of the councillors to vote also for such a project, because they have to follow certain rules and conditions. And then how to submit an application, and it will provide you also with some help in directions where you can find help. So we move on to the application forms. After careful reading of the call document, the director decides now to prepare an application, and she is now much clearer, or he is much more clearer of what they want to do to improve the climate resilience of Koprivnica health system. They want to implement the blue-green infrastructure to reduce the heat island effect. They want to look into future risks of new vector-borne diseases, because if they put blue-green infrastructure, what will happen to the mosquitoes? And with this, they also will contribute to the health national adaptation plan. So good ideas to how to put this now into a proposal. So we would go in this funding and tender portal then into the starting of or the creation of a proposal. On the left side, again, you have the key dates like the deadline. Then you can download the templates for the part B. So now you will have to click a couple of times. So the download for the templates. On the right side, you will have to enter a specific number which is attributed to your organization, either that exists already or you need to apply for this, which is the so-called PIC number, the personal identification code, or personal identification code, I think it's called. And you will have to enter an acronym of your proposal and a short summary of your proposal. If you get stuck with any of the technical issues, you will have on the left bottom side several possibilities to access help again, so that either technical, when you have technical problems, you have manuals, you have a lot of guidance, so it should be easier to find your way through this portal. So we go to the next slide, please, because I would like to highlight a couple of chapters of the parts of the structure of the proposal. So we have 3 parts. Part A are administrative forms. They are generated from your information in the portal. So you provide the information into the text boxes, for example, the summary, as you have seen already. Then we have the part B, which is a technical description, which is uploaded as a PDF in PDF format in the submission portal. And then we have part C, which again forms you have to fill in, where you fill in your key performance indicators, so the targets you want to achieve with your project. Next slide, please. So the part A will you have to write the acronym you have seen already, the abstract, and here I highlighted it a bit. The abstract is the business card of your proposal, and you really should invest time for this. You should also polish your abstract at the end when you have fully written your proposal, that everyone who reads the abstract of the proposal sees immediately what do you want to achieve, what is your starting point, what is your aim, and what are the means and the activities you want to deploy. Of course, it has to be short. That is the big challenge. But many actors in the process of the evaluation, they may only read the abstract and already have a certain opinion about the proposal. Then you write about the participants, the list of participants, you put in the staff efforts, you put a list of critical risks you should identify. And then we have as a third part a budget table where you include certain figures to describe the budget with which you want to implement your project later on. Now we go with the next slide to the part B. The part B, and sorry, there is a small typo. It's not an RFT, it's an RTF, a rich text format. So whatever a Word format, so you use a text software to write your proposal, and you use the structure which you download from the portal. There's a cover page, there are a table of contents, there is the project summary. You don't rewrite it. That will be then taken from the part A into later on into this part B. And it was already mentioned by Hans in the previous presentation. There are rules. Do not remove the instructions, for example, because we want to ensure that there is equal treatment for all applicants. So everybody should have the same space to describe the proposal. So do not remove the instructions just to gain more pages, for example. So there is a page limit, 120 for the main projects, but check carefully the call document because it's described there exactly. Also the character limit is described there, the character size. So also please do not fiddle around with those ones. And then we have the main chapters of the application form part B. So next, yeah, thank you. So the application form, and here I already put the award criteria next to the main chapters of the proposal. So the first chapter of the proposal is the relevance. So here we or you are invited to provide all this background information which is needed to understand the starting point of your proposal. So, for example, the director of the hospital, they need to provide much more information than just a bill for or an estimation of the water fountains. That's of course not sufficient. We need to see what is the starting point, what is the pre-operational context, what are the pre-operational conditions, and how do you intend to solve the problem? What are the individual steps to solve the problem? What is the size of the intervention area, for example? Does it fit together? So the concept and the methodology, the so-called intervention logic, is very important to describe carefully in this part. For example, should it be in the entire city, or is it just a certain area within the city? So this is what something where you have to decide, and best you provide also some maps and some visual graphics to make the evaluator understand in which area you are do you want to be active and operate and solve a problem. What is the maximum heat? are there many tropical nights, for example? You would provide certain statistics in this chapter. How many people live in that area? How many are affected in terms of the age distribution? And then how many fatalities happen? Do you have a trend? How and what would be then the objectives in how you would like to solve this problem? And then the director, together with the mayor, they say, okay, we will build a communal alert system. We will build a support structure where we build cooling rooms, water fountains. We will convert parking lots into so-called wadis or water parks. But we would also like to provide inputs to the local and national health adaptation strategy, because this is something which is being built up and where various organizations are providing help for this. We go on with the second part, the implementation. No, sorry, not with the implementation, with the impact. So yes, thank you. So the ambition of the impact is very important. You describe what your project intends to deliver, quantified in figures. We want to know where do you intend to stand at the end of the project, and even beyond the end of the project. So we are even asking for the impacts, the envisaged impacts 3 or even 5 years after the project. So how much will you decrease, for example, the peak temperatures in the demonstration area? How many people will find help in the support structures? How much will happen in terms of behavior change, for example, and what kind of follow-up actions will result from your demonstrations? For example, behavior change in the ways private people design their gardens. Instead of stone gardens, artificial stone gardens, they do more green and insect-rich gardens. Also to describe how they will make the demonstrations last, and even opposition party in a local authority will take over, that you make sure that the achievements will not be scrapped and continued. And this, of course, is very important for us, particularly replication and upscaling, because we are not just looking at solving local problems, but your proposal should demonstrate also EU added value. So we go on with the implementation part, and of course, we expect an excellent implementation, which needs a very good intervention logic with a good work plan. So you describe in brief your work plan, which you roll out in your work packages. And here we often see the issue that very good description, ambition in the first chapter of relevance, but then when it comes to the work packages and the description of the individual activities, we don't find a lot of information anymore. And the evaluators need to scratch their head and think, how do they actually want to do it? So you need to describe this. You need the sub-objectives, the activities you want to do, the tasks, and what are the milestones, how you measure the progress of your activities, and then deliverables, because you want to disseminate the experiences also from your activities. How will you involve stakeholders? Not only involve, but also engage your stakeholders. Whom would you need for doing this? You will have a chapter on the impact monitoring and reporting, and then obviously also communication, dissemination, and visibility. And again, the award criteria will exactly look at those aspects, and you will receive, or the proposal will receive, respective points for this. And finally, next slide, the money part. Well, it's not only the money, it's the resources, is also the consortium setup. We often ask, how many partners should we put in a proposal? The answer is as many you need for implementing your proposals in implementing your objectives. It can be the hospital and the local authority, maybe a national health association, maybe another town. You may team up with a neighboring town to have maybe more impact. And finally, the budget is important, and the value for money is, of course, what we look at, how much resources or how much budget you assign to the individual activities, and what will be the result of this. So we move on. So the next slide is only additional information, but we have, if you have declarations, if you have support letters, for example, please put them in, because they can help to underline certain information you have, list of previous projects. And then we have a detailed budget table. Please, next slide, to look at the detailed budget table briefly. You will hear more about the budget in the next presentation. So just one recommendation here, that while you are requested to put budget in two different places, here would be the place where you again justify, why do I need this kind of resources? What kind of subcontracting do I put to the project, and how do I justify it? You can also use the work package space to already justify certain resource issues, also budget issue, but here would be the place where you can put further details, which helps the evaluator to better assess the proposal. So now we go quickly through the evaluation process for the next 5 minutes. So next slide, please. Just to give you in the presentation an overview of what approximately could be the success rate of your proposal. We have something in the range between 15 and 30% of success rate. So for the current call, we have indicative budgets here. You have seen them already in the previous slide. And we intend to select under nature biodiversity 20 to 30 projects, circular economy, quality of life, it's 35 to 40 standard action projects. And in CLIMA, we have usually between 25 and 35 projects selected. Depends, of course, always of the size of the proposals. And as already mentioned, 60%, in some exceptions, 75% of co-financing is allowed. Next slide, please. We have a number of admissibility and eligibility checks during the evaluation. Has to be submitted before the deadline. The forms have to be complete. All the templates provided has to be readable in Arial 10, printable, maximum 120 pages for those standard action projects. And we also look at the eligibility, in particular the eligibility of the participants, and whether they come from the member states or associated countries to the LIFE program. Next slide. And then you have we have the award grid according to which we are assessing the proposal. So you see again the 4 main award criteria: relevance, impact, quality, and resources. You have to pass with a minimum of 10 points each of the criteria. The maximum score is 20 points. But you have to be more than just 10 points, because you have to reach at least 55 points to be a passing proposal out of 100 points. And then there are 5 bonus points where if you have particular synergies with other subprograms, you will receive 2 bonus points if the proposal is in an outermost region, when the results are upscaled from another EU project. If there are particular catalytic potential, you will receive also 2 points. And if there's a transnational consortium, a real transnational consortium, that is also worth 2 points. So next slide, please. just for your business plan, I mean, because it takes some time until a grant agreement is signed. So it does not mean that when you attend the meeting now, the next month you could get the money. No, the submission is the 17th or 19th of September. Then we have an independent evaluation phase, and we intend to notify the applicants then around March, and the successful ones will be invited into the grant agreement preparation process. That means we will sign the grant agreement with the successful applicants in May, June 2025. So that means in around July, from July onwards, you can start your project. Last slide, please. So final recommendations from my side. So please start now. If you have not yet started, it's already getting late. Read the relevant information and consult also the national contact points. Focus on your objectives, not too many. Focus really, build a credible intervention logic, build a relevant consortium, link your budget to the activities and check the value for money. Ask also your family whether they would pay money for this. Follow the template and instruction when writing proposals, and submit multiple times, not only at the last moment. Do it already during the draft of the proposal. You will always overwrite what you have in the portal, and if there should be something happening with the final polished version, at least we can read the previous version and it's not lost if you miss the deadline. So with this, I would like to thank you and hand over to Eva.
Thank you very much, Bernd. It was a great presentation with a lot of information, and I understand that maybe for some of our audience, it might be a lot. That's you shouldn't worry, because you will find all the slides in the event platform and on the live website. So don't worry about that. I will now pass the floor to Licinia Pereira, Financial Manager here at CINEA, who will give us a presentation on how to apply for life, and especially on the financial aspects of an application. Licinia, sorry, but I would ask you to be a bit quick, because we are a bit running yeah, a bit late, but don't worry. Take the time you need, and we'll see you later. Okay, thanks a lot, Licinia, for joining us.
Okay, thank you, Eva. Thank you, Bernd, in particular. I think you set up my presentation very well. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to attempt at giving you some tips and advice on the financial side. So we're here to help you and to guide you, and in particular to give you some information on how you would translate your action into numbers and to cost categories. So next slide, please. So we start with the reference documents. So I'm imagining that you're already very familiar with the first link, which is where you can get all the legislation, grant agreement, all the templates, and also, of course, the call texts, so that you can see the particularities for each of the subprograms from live. Then the next one is the model grant agreement. So this is the grant agreement that you would be signing. Sorry, can you go back to the previous slide? Yes, thank you. So the second link is the model grant agreement. So this is the model of the grant agreement that you will be signing in case your action is selected for funding. So here you will see what you sign up to. So please have a look. Then the next one is the live annotated grant agreement, and here is the grant agreement, but with comments, with an interpretation, with guidance. The last version we have is from 1st of April. It is not finalized. It's a live document, so we invite you to regularly check if there's a new version. And the last one is the rules for the legal entity validation and financial capacity assessment. In case you're selected for funding, you will be contacted by our services to validate your legal entity in the system to get a PIC and a LIER, but this is too early maybe to talk about that. what I would also like to mention is the next one, the financial capacity assessment. So if you plan to be the coordinator and you are a private entity and you want to have a look if your financial capacity is good or not, you can already go into this link, make a self-assessment, and then in case it's good, well, you have nothing to worry about. But in case you would be weak or even insufficient, it is a high probability that we would ask for a financial guarantee for receiving the first pre-financing. So just the quick links that we really invite you to look. Next slide. Thank you. So here we start with the roles in the grant agreement. So who are the participants in your action and who will be reflected in the grant agreement? Of course, the most important entity is the coordinator, because they will be the contact point towards us, the granting authority. They are the ones that sign the grant agreement. Then the beneficiaries, they are the other entities, your partners, who will also sign the grant agreement with the accession form. And then you might have affiliated entities. So these affiliated entities have the same conditions as the beneficiary, but they do not sign the grant agreement. And what is important is that there needs to be a legal or capital link um, between the beneficiary and the affiliated entity. However, it is the beneficiary who keeps the responsibility for this affiliated entity. Then you have another type of participant, which are called associated partners. Please differentiate with a life legacy. It has the same name, but it's different in the new MFF. These are participants that want to be in the grant agreement. They want to contribute. They will have tasks. However, they will not charge any costs to the action, and they will also not claim any contributions. They will also not sign the grant agreement, okay? Then you have other participants, subcontractors, in case you are thinking, because for one reason or the other, you don't have the expertise and you think of subcontracting, outsourcing some specific action task, they will be the subcontractors. Also potential recipients of financial support to third parties. I will go into that later on. And also in-kind contributors. Please note right from the beginning that in-kind contributions are allowed, but they are not reflected in the budget, either on the costs or in the income side. So they are, if you will, silent participants. Next slide, please. Here is just an extract that you will find in the annotated grant agreement, so the second link that I mentioned earlier on. And here is just a description, who does what, who is eligible, are they in the annex, what are the conditions for the participation. And then the last column is where you will find in the model grant agreement some explanations into these different participants. For lack of time, I will not go into details, but you have this information here for your convenience. Next slide, please. So what do you need to do in financial terms? Bern has already gone a little bit over this. So you will be requested to fill in mainly two parts. The part one, which is the overall budget. I will show in a minute what it looks like. And here you will have to put per beneficiary or affiliated entity the costs that you will have and per cost category. So the different types of costs, personnel, subcontracting, etc. The associated partner will be there, but with zero costs. Then the next one is the detailed budget. And here is where you really go into the details and where you will be providing the justification. Okay. Again, it will be by cost category, beneficiary, affiliated entity. And of course, you will also have to submit the staff effort for associated partners. We really urge you to go into the call documents to see what cost categories are eligible and be realistic. Next slide, please. So here is what the first table looks like, so the general one. So you see here the columns name of the beneficiary, country, what is the role, coordinator or a beneficiary, as affiliated entity, associated partner, then the personal costs, then subcontracting, purchase cost, travel and subsistence, equipment, other goods, works and services, the indirect costs, and so on and so forth, and also how you plan to finance this. So the income, any in-kind contributions, financial contributions, your own resources. And here it's important that the total costs equal the total estimated project in revenue. So the last column must be equal to the total estimated costs. Okay, next slide, please. Here is a print from the detailed budget, which the template you will also find in the reference in the portal, the reference document section. Here is the first part. So the staff effort allocation, you will need to put per participant and then how each participant is involved in each work package. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, thank you. Then we go into more details into personal costs, always per participant or affiliated entity, then the country, the number of person months, and then the average monthly rate, which we will be checking, and we will be contacting you if it's higher than the normal average rate foreseen for this for the country and the type of organization. And then you have the different types of staff costs. So the most normal one or common one, I would say, employees, then A2, A3s, don't worry, I will go into that later, SME owners without salary, then also volunteers, etc. Next slide, please. Then we will go into subcontracting. Here you have some instructions, as you can see. Very important, please only put subcontracting for action tasks that you will be describing in the work packages. You will be requested to provide a justification if this goes higher than 30% of the total costs. Then other direct costs, you see here different rows, travel and subsistence, equipment, other goods, works and services, financial support to third parties, and land purchase. So please here you need to provide the cost and then the justification, a justification which is enough for the evaluators to understand what this is and to give us some indication, is this eligible, is this exaggerated, etc., etc. Next slide, please. So how do you go about this? First thing is check the call document. What is eligible, and very important as well, what is not eligible? Always indicate in euros your costs. You have an indirect cost, a flat rate of 7%. This is over all the direct costs except volunteer and land purchase. Except where the calls where this is not allowed, of course. If you are an organization which already receives an operating grant, normally this is not allowed unless you can demonstrate in your accounting system you have a way of separating and there's no double funding. For the unit costs, this is where you can get some guidance on how to calculate this unit costs. I will come back to that later. Next slide, please. So some of you have already been asking in Slido, and please keep those questions coming. We will be looking into them later on. What is the co-funding rate? So it really depends on the type of action that you will be applying for. So for the standard action projects, the SAPs, it's 60%. With the exception of nature and biodiversity. So it will be higher, 75%, if it's exclusively priority habitats or species, and 67% if it's priority and non-priority habitats and species. Then you have the strategic nature and integration projects, that's 60%. Any technical assistance projects TAPPs and TARs are 60, and then the caps are 95. And then other actions, it differs. For example, SET, so clean energy transition is 95%, and then operating grants is 70%. Next slide, please. So how is it calculated, the maximum EU funding of your grant? So it's based on the eligible costs. So the system will calculate for each beneficiary the theoretical maximum. Each beneficiary, so you, when you will go into the system, you can enter a lower EU funding requested. So either because you have co-financers, or you predict that you will have income from your project, or you have own resources higher, that is possible. Then the maximum grant amount will be decided by the EU, and it normally corresponds to the requested amount, but it also may be lower. Please note that the amount at the interim and final payment shall not be higher than the amount which is fixed in the grant agreement. So if you decide to request lower, please bear this in mind, that at the end this will be reflected. Next slide, please. So what are the payment types? And this is very important for your planning, of course, on how you will choose the reporting periods of your action. So each action always starts with a pre-financing. Normally the pre-financing is around 30%. This is also indicated in the code text. And then for most actions, there will be additional pre-financings and a final payment. For some actions, namely the strategic nature and integration projects, interim payments are foreseen. And then for the TAPPs, only a final payment is foreseen. So what is the difference between an additional pre-financing and an interim payment? Is with additional pre-financing, you will get another cash injection, so another advance payment. Whereas in the interim payment, we are already checking some costs. And so the amount of cash that you will receive will depend on the costs that you have incurred, whereas in the first one, it will be a percentage. However, also depending on the amount that you have consumed before. So please take note that the amount of the reporting periods and the duration will have an impact on the percentage of each additional pre-financing, or the amount that will be paid, reflecting the costs that you have already incurred. Next slide, please. So what are the eligible costs? How do we evaluate that they are eligible? Of course, they have to be incurred either by you or by your affiliated entity, and during the duration of the project, except of course the final reporting or the audit report if you have to submit one. It has to be foreseen in the grant agreement, so belonging to one of the budget categories of the call. Otherwise, you will have to do an amendment and request the introduction of new costs. It needs to be directly related to the action and necessary, identifiable, verifiable, and the accounts of the beneficiary. So please remember that your action might be subject either to our ex-ante controls, also to audits after you receive interim or final payments. And lastly, oh, sorry, I forgot. It needs to be compliant with the national laws and taxes, of course, labor and social security. And lastly, the costs need to be reasonable, justify, and comply with the principle of sound financial management. This means that if we find costs not justified, excessive, then we reserve the right to reject them. Next slide, please. Of course, for unit costs and flat rates, this is slightly different because they need to be also declared in the correct budget category. Of course, the costs which the flat rate relates to need to be eligible as well, incurred in the period of the action. They need to be necessary for the implementation, and very important for unit costs. The particular point on how you calculated the units, the number of units, is of much relevance. And here we indicate the article where you can find further information on this, namely Article 20 of the Model Grant Agreement. Next slide, please. So what are the types of costs that you will have to put in your foreseeable costs? So how do you translate your action into costs, and where will you indicate them? So first you need to take into consideration that you can only indicate direct costs. So anything which is indirect costs calculated through a percentage or costs drives, they will be in the 7% flat rate. So please do not put them elsewhere. So you have these main four types of costs: personal costs, subcontracting, purchase costs, and other cost categories. So in personal costs, you have 5 different types of categories that we will be looking at in a minute. Then subcontracting, purchase cost, there are 3 types. And then the financial support to third parties, land purchase, which is other cost. And I will be going into each one of these. Next slide, please. So starting with personal costs, I mean, most of our actions we see that the A1 costs for employees are equivalent are the most common ones. So what costs can you declare? Salaries, social security contributions, other costs linked to remuneration, either arising from national law or from the employment contract, and also if they are usual to your practice. So if they are usual to the organization. Then A2, natural persons. So they are working under direct contract under the other than the employment contract, and seconded persons. So seconded persons by a third party, but that you are paying, so against payment. And these costs are eligible on top of all the other conditions, of course, with these 2 additional ones. So the work of A2 and A3 employees or working persons are eligible if the work conditions are similar to your employees, namely the way the work is done, the tasks, the premises, and also, for example, teleworking conditions, also salaries, they have to be similar, and the result of the work belongs to the beneficiary unless it has been agreed otherwise. Then you have SME owners or natural persons not receiving a salary. Here, there are unit costs. And then lastly, the volunteers. So they are persons that work freely for our organization. It's not compulsory, but they don't get paid. I will go into that later. Next slide, please. So how do you calculate this? Basically, you take what it costs, a person costs you, your employee costs you in a year, you divide it by 12 and you divide by person months. And then you have the number of equivalent days to be budgeted for this person per year. Please note, and we strongly invite you to read the annotated grant, the annotated grant agreement, the section on personal costs, on how it's calculated, because this has really changed in relation to the Life Legacy program. And for example, one of the things that you can see that is already different is that the maximum equivalent days that you can declare is 215 per year. Okay. Then for the costs of natural persons and seconded personnel, this really depends on the type of contract that you have. So we really invite you to go into the contract and have a look there on what the costs that you may have. And remembering, of course, that the conditions, the working conditions need to be similar to your employees. Next slide, please. For the SME owners and natural persons not receiving a salary, if they are receiving a salary, you need to put them in A1. And the A5 volunteers, this is how it's done. You need to go into the model grant agreement into Annex 2.8. And there you will find the formula, which is indicated here for the SME owners. So basically you divide 5,080 by 18, you get this amount, and then you need to multiply it by the country specific coefficient. And this is how you get your unit cost, your daily rate. And then you must multiply by the number of unit or costs or daily rates that you think this person will work. For the volunteer costs, this is slightly different. There is an amount per country indicated, so you just need to console that. There is these different these conditions. The amount of volunteers costs that you will declare is maximum 50% of the total project costs and contributions, and the maximum EU contribution cannot be higher than the total eligible costs without volunteers. So it's it's a tricky concept to grasp. So I advise you put it in an Excel, and then you will see that it's not so difficult then to check this. Please bear in mind that when you are reporting later on at interim or final payment stage, you may not exceed this maximum amount. And for volunteers, we really stress that this is not, it's the only exception. It's not really a cost because you don't have to pay. And the aim is really to help you increase the costs so that we will give you a higher EU contribution, but it is very important that you understand that you will not be transferring any money to the volunteers. You will not be paying them. Next slide, please. So now we come to the second cost category, namely subcontracting. As usual, it needs to comply with the general eligibility conditions that I just mentioned. It's awarded using the beneficiary's usual purchasing practices. And very important, it needs to ensure two things: best value for money, if it's appropriate, then the lowest price, and no conflict of interests. It may only cover a limited part of the action. So we've just mentioned to you, you will see in the Annex 1 detailed budget, the reference is 30%, unless it's properly justified, and we have accepted this. However, if you are a contracting authority entity within the meaning of the EU directives on public procurement, you must also comply with applicable national law or public procurement. And very important, of course, in subcontracting is that the coordination of the action cannot be subcontracted. The coordination of the action of your project cannot be attributed to another entity. It's very important that, of course, this stays within the consortium. Next slide, please. So there is normally some confusion, and sometimes even we have difficulties in assessing, is this subcontracting or is this a purchase of a service, goods or works? So we give you some examples. So on subcontracting, you really have subcontracts which concern action tasks. And the price for the subcontracts will be under subcontracting costs, so under section B. Examples of purchases, it can be travels, equipments, goods and services that are necessary for your action, but they are not an important part, an action task of the action. We give you some examples. For example, if you are requested to, if you reach the threshold for the certificate on financial statements, then you will be requested to do one, to provide one, and this is not subcontracting. This will be in services. Translation of documents, publication of brochures, contract of transportation, so purchase of a cost, meeting rooms, catering, this is also a purchase cost. Hiring, for example, consultants, legal experts, IT consultant, this is normally also a purchase cost. However, if you are contracting, for example, carrying out of energy audits, then if this is an action task, this will be subcontracting. If you have doubts, then put it in subcontracting. And if your application will be selected for funding, we can always come back to you and ask for clarification, and then you can always move it to the right cost category. Next slide, please. So we come to the third cost category, purchase costs. Travel and subsistence, you need to calculate it in line with your usual practices. In terms of equipment, you need to check the call document because there are two possibilities. One is that you can only claim depreciation, and the next one, it will be in the next slide, is you can claim full cost and then you need to provide a list. So if you are under option 1, only depreciation of costs, you can declare costs which are actually incurred and written off in your accountancy. Only the portion of the costs that correspond to the rate of actual use. So please pay attention to the duration of your action. And then if you decide to rent or to lease, this is possible, but then these costs cannot exceed the usual amount that you would pay for the depreciation of a similar equipment. Next slide, please. So the equipment, this is the section option, and I was just telling you about. So you can declare the full cost of the equipment, but then you need to comply with the durability clause, which you will find described in Annex 5 of the Model Grant Agreement. Or you can depreciate, and if you depreciate, you need to list the equipment. So this equipment will be then listed in your grant agreement. And this is, for example, allowed for the standard action projects, the strategic nature, and integrated projects. So the equipment needs to be purchased and developed specifically for the action. And additionally, you need to commit to use and maintaining using this equipment after the end of the action for activities pursuing the action's objectives. And the duration needs to be at least 5 years after the end of the action or until this equipment has been fully depreciated, whichever is earlier. And of course, this needs to be recorded in your accounting system as a fixed asset amount and according to international and your usual standards. Next slide, please. Here I come to the third type of sub-cost category, so goods, works, and services. I've already given you some examples. For example, the certificate on financial statements, translations, publications, campaigns, promotions, also consumables and supplies, which are not indirect costs. If they are really specific to the action, otherwise they are covered by the flat rate. And the CFS, which will be requested if you request more, equal or more than 500,000 EU contribution. And please note that this is per beneficiary and affiliated entity. For operating grants, the threshold is 100,000. Next slide, please. And I'm trying to look at the time, if I still have a lot or not. Okay, I still have half an hour. Thanks, that's great. So now we come to the last cost category, which is financial support to third parties. This is only allowed in some calls, so please check if this is your case. So what does this constitute? This is, as the name indicates, this is support. This is cash money that you will be giving to third entities, which are not going to be in the grant agreement. And this is in the form of grants or prices or similar forms of support. And in order for them to be eligible, they need to be in the call, of course, where there is indicated a maximum amount per action and third party. They need to fulfill the general eligibility conditions, of course, calculated on the basis of the costs actually incurred, and they really need to be well explained, all the criteria I will indicate in the next slide, in the Annex 1. Next slide, please. So these are the conditions that we really request you to mention in Annex 1. And depending on what it is, this is the criteria that you need to indicate. So for grants, you need to indicate which is the amount per third party, how you will be calculating this amount. What are the different types of activities that you want to finance or that you want these entities to finance? What type of persons or categories could receive such a report? And finally, which is the criteria and procedures that you will be using to give this financial support? So we understand that it's difficult perhaps at this stage that you know already this, but you really need to give us as much detail as possible, and you really need to at least indicate something in each of these criteria. We need to understand, and we need to uh, perceive it as justified, necessary, and then accept this. In terms of price, what is the eligibility and award criteria? What will be the amount of the prize, and how will you be paying these prices? And again, you need to provide as much detail as you can. Next slide, please. So we come to the last cost category, which is land purchase. This is also very specific. So these are costs that would be incurred by private entities. They would include a long-term lease of land or also one-off compensations for the use of land rights. They will be eligible if they will be foreseen in the call. Also the general eligibility conditions that I indicated, based on the costs actually incurred, and they need to comply with land purchase criteria. Next slide, please. So what is this land purchase criteria? So it needs to contribute to improving, maintaining, restoring the integrity of Natura 2000 network. Is the only or most cost-effective way of achieving the objectives of this conservation action. It's reserved in long term for uses consistent with the specific objectives of the LIFE program. The member state where this land is going to be purchased ensures that there is a long-term assignment of such land to nature conservation by ensuring that there is an entry into the land register. I just heard something in my micro. I hope I am not having any problems with my microphone.
We can hear you now well, Lucinia, don't worry.
Okay, I had to do something with my micro. Sorry for that. So the beneficiary, so you would have to entry this into the land register, includes a condition that the land will be assigned definitely to nature conservation, or if there is no land register or such a condition is not possible under national law, then that such condition is either included in the land sale contract or guaranteed by equivalent means. Next slide, please. So, what should the private beneficiaries do to ensure that there's long-term conservation? You need to make sure that the entry into the land register includes a condition that in case of dissolution or incapacity to manage the land according to nature conservation requirements, the property will be transferred to an entity primarily active in the field of nature protection, or if there is no land register, then that this is included in the sale contract or guaranteed by equivalent means. For purchases of partial rights, you need to ensure the entry into the land register reflects the long-term nature conservation objectives and the requirements which you will be seeing in the model grant agreement. For land purchase to be exchanged at a later date for another parcel on which the action will be undertaken, then what you need to do is the exchange is carried out before the end of the action, and you need to check again the requirements in the model grant agreement. And finally, for long-term leases, the lease is of at least 20 years, and it includes provisions and commitments that ensure the achievement of the objective
protection.
Sorry, Licinia, we can't hear you well. No.
Yes, it's again my microphone.
An issue with the
Sorry
microphone.
for
Now we hear you.
Great. Next slide, please. So we've talked about the direct costs. Now the indirect costs. So it's 70% of the direct costs, excepting volunteer costs and land purchase. And again, if you have an operating grant, these are normally not allowed unless you can demonstrate that your accounting system does not cover any costs of the action grant. Next slide, please. So we've now covered all the eligible costs, direct and indirect. Now we go into looking into the most typical ineligible costs, and these you will find also in the grant agreement. These are only some examples, so if you have doubts, please also check the annotated grant agreement. So here are highlighted some of the most common ones. Namely, I will just refer to VAT. So if it's deductible or refundable, then it's not eligible. This is the rule that we use to declare if it's eligible or not. Next slide, please. So here is also an indication of costs that are not eligible. The first one relates to double funding. Okay, so obviously, if you are already receiving contribution, EU contribution for other grants, of course, that you cannot declare the same costs in two different EU grants. This will be receiving twice for the same cost. Of course, this is not allowed. Also, costs or contribution for staff of a national administration. If these activities are already part of the administration's normal activities. And then also costs or contributions, especially travel or subsistence for the staff or representatives of EU institutions, bodies, and agencies, so us. Costs specifically declared ineligible in the related call. So again, please go to the call and see if there's a specific cost which is not eligible. For example, separate website costs are only eligible if justified, etc. So please always check the call text for this. Next slide, please. So finalizing, we just wanted to mention some frequent errors. So these are things that we have seen in the proposals received in the last 2 years. In terms of personal costs, for example, SME owners not receiving salary should be indicated in the section A4, and sometimes they're indicated in A1. So when this is the case, then we ask for the correction. When the threshold is reached, sometimes the certificate on financial statements is missing from the Annex 1, or it's too expensive. Sometimes the subcontracting costs are indicated as subcontracting, but they are not outsourcing action project tasks. So we ask them to be indicated under the section C3, purchase of costs. For the equipment in the Annex 1 detailed budget, there is no indication if this is a full cost or a depreciation. If you have only the option 1, depreciation, of course, this is obvious that everything is to be depreciated. But if you have the option 2, either full cost or a list of the equipment, you need to indicate in the Annex 1 if it's full cost or depreciated. For finance support to third parties, the criteria is not explained, sometimes not at all. Some of the criteria is not addressed at all. And it's all spread out in different sections of the proposal. So we would ask you to put this is in one section and addressing all the criteria. Also, sometimes in the Annex 1 detailed budget, there is a big cost and there's no explanations or details attached to this cost. And of course, then we have no elements to assess if these are justified, are necessary. And so, of course, if the proposal is selected for funding, we will have to come back to you to get a further clarification. So it's good also that right from the start, you do this correctly, and you know also the level of detail that you need to indicate in the proposal so that we can correctly assess it and also award points on your proposal accordingly. And I think that's the next slide will be my final slide. So thank you so much. I think in the end I was quite okay. I'm well in advance.
Wow, Licinia, I'm impressed. You managed to go through the whole presentation really clearly and very quickly. So you even caught up the delay. So thanks a lot. I think the presentation was very clear and very insightful. So I think, I hope it was clear for everybody, and everybody now knows what are the main rules and how to apply for life funding, and especially on the financial aspects of the application. So thanks a lot, Licinia. We will have a question and answer session after the coffee break. I think it will be Anne Vermalen from your team who will join. So all the questions that we will receive, we will keep them for later. We will also have a general question and answer session tomorrow. So please remember that all the questions that can't be answered today will be moved to the most relevant session. So in case you don't see your question today in the question and answer sessions, please don't worry, because it will be just moved, and you will find it during the relevant session that you will follow later. You can still register for any of the sessions that will follow. Maybe can I have the agenda for this afternoon? However, now we will have a break, because I think we all need to stretch our legs and get a little bit of water. But yeah, just as a reminder, after the coffee break, there will be a question and answer session on general and financial aspects. So we will see our colleagues that made the presentations this morning, who will be the panelists for this session. And this afternoon, we will have some more specific presentations on some particular calls for proposals for life projects that are strategic projects and technical assistance replication projects. So just as a reminder, we will publish all the slides that you have already seen, and the future slides in the LIFE website, as well as on the EU LIFE 24 platform, the one where you have registered for this event. So do not worry in case you missed something. You will find all the slides there, and also you will find all the recordings. You will find the recordings of this event also. So not only on the LIFE website and on the platform of the event, but also on the YouTube live channel. So I really have to thank Licinia for allowing us to have a long coffee break. And I would say we can stop here. But please remember that we will have a question and answer session that starts at 11:45. And it will be moderated by my colleague, Giulia Carboni. So we will reconvene here online using the same link at 11:45 for a long question and answer session. So thanks a lot to all the speakers of this morning session, and see you in a bit.
Good morning also from my side, and welcome back. My name is Giulia Carboni. I'm a program coordination manager at CINEA. The 30% of you that has already attended these info days might remember my name and my face. For the other, I'm a new face. My colleague Eva has introduced you and will continue to introduce these sessions in these days. We have now with us the colleagues that gave the presentation in the morning and some more support to answer the many questions that are already out there on Slido. So I'll ask my colleagues to join me with their camera on, and I'll ask the support team to show us the Slido already. That's the code you can use to join us on Slido. It's also always there on the panel that you see. Remember, we're taking the question by the most number of likes. So if you really find a question that it's meaningful to you, do not ask it again, but like it. And in this way, you announce the probability that we will get to it and to reply to it. We have nearly an hour for this, 45 minutes. So let's go with this. And there is a question that received 35 likes from Timo Glassberg. I think I'll ask this to Anne Borrell, perhaps, if Anne, you're ready.
Certainly.
To double check, do we need a consortium to apply, or can we apply as a single entity without partners?
Indeed, it's up to you. You can apply as a single entity or you can apply as part of a consortium. You need to think about what it is that you want to achieve in your project and what skills you have, what other skills potential partners have, and make the decision on putting together the best team for the job.
Very well indeed. I don't know if Hans wants to comment a little bit on this one, or I can do it, because I do know that under the clean energy transition sub-program, you might have some topics where indeed you do need a consortium, and you will learn more about this on Thursday on the specific day dedicated to CET. But Hans, do you want to complement this?
No, indeed. I think Julia, you've said it all. To watch out for those who are applying under coordinated and support action. The specific descriptions of the topics, because most of the topics there do require that applicants come from at least 3 different EU countries, and so there is a consortium requirement for these calls. It doesn't apply to all of the topics, but for the large majority of them.
Indeed. Thanks a lot, Hans. Here we have a question that is asking us future telling. I don't know if, Anne, you can be that advanced in your skills for future telling, but I will read it. And will the live calls return to a 2-step proposal procedure next year for the new programming period, I guess they want to say. And I guess they're looking at strategic project. But Anne, what is your interpretation?
Well, the strategic projects are 2-step at the moment. So I guess they're asking more about the standard action projects. I mean, at the moment, there's no intention to return to the 2-step for them. We've done a lot of reflection and talking to people about this question, and there are pros and cons to 1 stage and 2 stage, but overall it seems that there are more people who prefer having a 1 stage because it gets to the signature of the grant faster. There's more certainty for the applicants in a shorter time span. I'd also add that it overall costs less, which means it reduces the administrative costs, so there's more money to give to grants.
Yes, indeed. Thanks a lot, Anne. The third question, I mean, this is actually going back a bit to the very first question. How many partners do you recommend for a SAP consortium, so standard action project? Fabio, I don't know if you want to say something about this. The person is also asking, is it important to find partners from other EU countries?
Thank you, Julia, and good morning. How many partners? The partners that you need to implement the project and to reach the objective. So it's the way around is not thinking about how many partners I need to put in life, but how many partners I need to implement the projects. This is the question you should address. And
to yourself.
Yeah,
not to us.
It is important to find partners from other EU countries. Same answer. Are they needed and essential for the implementation of the project? Yes, then otherwise not.
or you are asking for clean energy transition, and then in the specific calls, you might have to do that.
Required. Yeah.
Yes. So I need to introduce Anne Vermalen to you, Head of Sector Finance. And sorry, Fabio, I didn't give you a proper introduction as Head of Sector Environment for Circular Economy and Quality of Life. And this question is for you, and it comes from Austria. Finance, where do you take normal average monthly rate per country and organization to check the personal cost? Could we check this ourselves in advance?
Okay, so maybe first to stress that when you apply, that you should use your own average monthly rates for the staff that you will assign to the project, because it's important, of course, that this is realistic for yourself. We use the rates that are published in the EC dashboard for the Horizon Europe program. So there we will just check if your rates are realistic. I'm not sure if I assume you will have access from the outside world, but I'm not entirely sure. Maybe we can see if we can put a link in the slides so that you can have a look there.
Thank you very much. Fabio, I think that I will come back to you on this one. What is the success rate of a specific action life application, rather 10% or 50%?
Okay, well, this is a bit complicated to answer, I would say, because it really depends on the call and on the thematic. So there is a lot of variation. Then, of course, I don't know what exactly is meant for success rate. Is it the one that get financed, the one that get recommended? To give you an idea, in the subprogram environment, for those that are recommended, we have a variation between a minimum of 20% to a maximum of 60%. So this is the ballpark range of success rate in terms of recommended for funding.
Thank you very much, Fabio. So the next one, I can answer, I think. In case a project received positive evaluation but was placed on the reserve list, is it recommended to resubmit the project for the second time to the same call for proposal, adding new elements? Thank you very much. Of course, it is recommended if you're still on with this project idea, and the new elements should be related to the kind of feedback you have received probably, or to, if you do have new elements, to address the environmental challenge or the climate challenge that you wanted to address with your proposal in the first place. But Bernd, Fabio, do you want to comment on this?
Go, Bernd, if you want. I already spoke.
Well, I mean, it's difficult to say. I mean, of course, if you receive an evaluation summary report, it gives you some hints whether the idea is good and you failed maybe in some aspects which can be easily fixed. Then I would suggest to go for a resubmission. I mean, we know that the LIFE program is a very flexible program, but where it is consistent is that during a multi-annual work program, even during the financing framework phase, we try to maintain as much as possible the priorities. So priorities do not necessarily or dramatically change from one year to the other, which allows you to submit a proposal to a similar priority for for a following year.
Yes, indeed. And this was particularly for the reserve list. So if you were in the reserve list, perhaps you were really close to be awarded a grant, and you might have some good chances the second time. And you want to add something on this, particularly on the nature side that this happens, that we have long reserve
that's
lists.
what I was going to say. I mean, I think as Fabio said, it depends very much on the subprogram and the call, but we have particularly long reserve lists for nature and biodiversity standard action projects. We get many more very high quality applications than we have budget for. And I mean, the budget is decided way above our heads, and it's not something that we're able to influence. So we do have a lot of projects that we would very much like to finance, but we can't finance. The competition is very tough. So certainly we would encourage people to apply again, but of course, there's no guarantee that you're going to rise to the top the next time. So you have to take, as Julia already said, you have to take into account the comments that you received in the evaluation summary report and see if you can, you know, optimize your application for the next year. And then, you know, you see how many other people are applying the next year. Ask your member states to put more budget on life.
Yes, and perhaps I stay with you on the outermost regions. Is the bonus point only for outermost region or also for overseas countries and territories?
Honestly, I am not sure. I think it's just outermost regions, but we would need to double check the criteria, and maybe Fabio knows better than I do.
In principle, the bonus points only refers to outmost regions and not overseas countries. Yeah. But yeah, we could double check in case. Huh?
Yeah.
It is written, I'm sure, clearly in the call document. Yeah. My recollection is it's only outermost regions.
Yeah.
And the call document, it's really your reference document before you start the application. So really have a close look at it. I'll take quickly the question from Jelena Zumpancic, as there are 15 people wanting this. What is the minimum and maximum project time for standard action project? We don't have a minimum project time. If I recall correctly, we do have now a maximum project time. Is it 10 years right now, Fabio?
Yes.
It's a 10 years project time, but really beyond the limits that we are setting for you, you have to assess your time depending on the project, on the problem and the challenge you are addressing and how you are. You have to convince us that the time frame that you are setting is the meaningful one, and you have to explain that to us. But yes, don't go beyond the 10 years. Do you require timesheet for personal cost in life projects? And don't tell me this is not Anne Vermalen. Don't tell me this is not a financial question, please.
Yes, it is obligatory, even for persons that are working full-time on the project.
Yes, thanks. Oh, this question from Tobias, perhaps I will ask it to Bernd. I see a philosophical reply arriving on this one. Would you recommend working with a consultancy for the application? Do you see significant differences in the quality success rate of proposals depending on whether consultancy was involved or not? Bernd.
We cannot recommend anything how you write your application. I mean, in my example, I mentioned consultancy. I mean, it can help, particularly if you are new to the program, if you are, for example, a small local authority who does not have the capacity of having an EU office within the local authority. So for this kind of situation, it may make sense to ask a consultancy or to work together with a consultancy. In any case, it should always be your project, and you I mean, as the applicant or the main applying entity should really have the ownership and only be supported by a consultancy. In terms of differences, we cannot say because we do not know whether a proposal was written by a consultancy or not. I mean, sometimes we guess. But it's usually not seen in a proposal, so we cannot really provide an answer to that. For a project, just to add on a little bit, I mean, you could engage a consultancy to continue supporting your project for, let's say, reporting or financial management. But again, the responsibility is with the main beneficiary or with the beneficiaries, with the coordinator, and not with a subcontracted entity.
Thanks very much, Bernd. This was indeed a complete reply. So next one, they are mentioning all the topics under the sub-program Circular Economy and Quality of Life. So perhaps, Fabio, I'll give it to you. But it's a quick yes, actually. Is it eligible for one organization to participate in 2 or more project proposals in the same call? Yes, as long as it makes sense.
Formally, yes, you're eligible. Of course, if you are going to be recommended for funding and having to run the projects, you need to ensure that you have the capacity to run all of them.
Indeed. So should there be one or more deliverable for each activity? In other EU funding programs, they emphasize fewer deliverables is better and most can be sensitive internal. What kind of deliverables and how many are best for life? I don't think you have a unique reply on this. Does anyone feels the... Anne, your mic is open. You want to speak on this?
Okay, I'll learn to close my mic. Well, I think the answer to this is kind of similar to some of the other answers you've heard. You need to have the number of deliverables that's appropriate to your project. So, I mean, if your project involves writing a lot of documents that you're presenting plans, you're presenting reports, then you should have deliverables for those. I would say that you want to make sure that each of the deliverables has a meaning and don't subdivide deliverables without a specific meaning to doing it, because obviously each one is an administrative procedure to upload. But think about what your project's doing. Think about what it is that you want to be delivering, how you're going to show that you've actually done the work for whatever it is you're proposing.
Yes. And another future telling question. Will there be important changes for standard action project in 2025 if our project is rejected during the first submission?
I can take that
Yeah,
if you'd like.
thanks.
I mean, yeah, right now we're operating under a multi-annual work program for 2021 to 2024. I'm afraid I can't tell you what it's going to look like in the multi-annual work program for 2025 to 2027. So it's possible there could be changes. It's really too early to say because the drafting of the multi-annual work program has only just started, and it's done in discussion with the member states in the LIFE committee. So we're really too early in the process to be able to answer that.
Yes, and Anna, I stay with you for the next one. It's important because it also redirects the participants through our info days. We have a dedicated session on operating grants on Friday, I remind you. NGO, you mentioned different possibilities for this type of organization. Could you mention which ones? Is it possible to participate in a grant if the organization is actually participating in a live project?
Okay, I think there are two questions here, and I'll answer one of them, and maybe Andrew Malin wants to complement a little on the second aspect. First question is, yes, you can participate in, an NGO can participate in any type of project. You can participate as the coordinating beneficiary in a standard action project. You probably wouldn't be the coordinating beneficiary, but a partner in a strategic project. You can certainly apply as either partner or lead in a replication project, PLP. Maybe not a technical assistance for project preparation. That's less likely to be an NGO. But in general, you can apply either as the lead or a partner in all kinds of different grants. As Fabio indicated before, if you end up being in more than one type of project, type of application, you need to make sure you have the capacity for them. If you specifically are in action grants and an operating grant is different from all of the other kinds of grants because it's based on your overall work program. There, you have to be careful on how you're accounting your time. And I think Andrew Malin's better placed than I am to maybe comment on that.
Yes, I think under operating grants, we finance your operating costs related to the specific work program within the LIFE program. There, of course, you need to be careful that if your operating grant is paying this operating cost, then under the other action grants, you can maybe not charge your the flat rate of the 7%, as normally your overheads are already paid through the operating grant. Unless you can demonstrate by the way that your accounting is set up that the same cost is not charged twice. So that is something to look into.
Thanks to both Anne. And now we take the question from Luke Kemps. Bernd, I'll ask it to you probably. So if the grant agreement is signed in June 2025, does the project then have to start in July, or could the starting date be delayed by a couple of months?
Well, in my presentation, I showed you the timeline with the indicative months when we would sign the grant agreements, which would be May, June 2025. And only for the successful proposals, of course. The default starting date is usually the first day, the month following the signature. In case you want to divert from the default starting date, this can be indicated during the grant agreement preparation phase. And of course, you would have the possibility to determine a starting date which is more suitable for you for the project. I mean, obviously, starting in July could be a problem if you have a longer holiday period. But Scandinavian countries, for example, they would be happy to start in July and August because holidays are already over. Sometimes we have proposals or projects they would like to start at a time when certain activities are to be started, maybe depending on let's say agriculture projects. They would to take the growing season into perspective. So all this can be justifications for starting later the project. Obviously, you should start soon after the grant has been signed and not a year later, obviously. Under very exceptional circumstances, you could even consider an earlier starting date. I mean, we are not really recommending this, but if that would be required, that could be discussed.
Thanks, Bernd. So Hans, perhaps I will ask you the following next two questions, as much as we really remember the specific data on percentage. But so can the co-financing be covered by national non-EU grants? First one. What would you say?
Yeah, thanks very much for that question. And the straightforward answer is yes. Obviously, we're very happy to combine programs with funding from national grants, but also own funds that the partners can bring into the program. The important thing here, I think, is just to remember that we need reassurances that these funds are available at the start of the project.
Maybe I can add one thing. This is that the LIFE project cannot be co-funded by other projects. So this will not be accepted.
Indeed.
Yes. And then we go to the next question. I stay with you once, but perhaps we see if some of the colleagues want to come in. What are the percentage of co-funding of CET and NGO grants and the main programs? So he or she wants to know it all.
Yeah, maybe starting with the clean energy transition program. So if I understand the question correctly, is what is the rate of co-financing that can be allowed? And as I mentioned during the presentation, for this program, when it concerns coordination and support actions, then the co-financing rate can be up to 95%. It's important that I stress this because this year we also have a small standard action program under the clean energy transition with a particular focus where the co-financing rate is the same as for all other standard action program, namely 60%. For the NGO grants, I suppose you're mentioning here specifically the call for NGO operating grants that both Anne and myself referred to. The co-financing rate is, if I'm not wrong, up to 70% of the annual application.
Yes.
I think for the main programs, we mainly speak about 60% for the standard action programs. I don't know if there's any other exceptions.
I don't recall any.
Well, I mean, there's under the nature program, there are for certain species that may be a slightly higher rate, but I think perhaps the important message is this information is in all of the call documents. So look up the specific call that you're interested in, and it's very clearly set out.
And select the right topic and the right program depending on the issues you want to solve and not depending on the co-financing rate you might get, because that could then drive you on the false path. Are there any requirements for the project consortium? We mentioned many about numbers and variety. I don't know if Fabio, you want to say something about type of beneficiaries, what's fitting, do we want research institute? We have always a reply for this, right?
Requirements, yeah, I mean, it's a bit generic as a question. So is it the legal requirements? Is it linked to the activities of the projects? To be honest, I'm not sure how to address this, but I mean,
Bernd
going back. Bernd, yeah, go please.
Just one recommendation: write a very good consortium agreement, which covers you from any eventualities which might occur in the in your project.
And you mean by that, Bernd, an agreement between the partners that we don't implement it all, but that you use between yourselves to make sure that everyone is on the same song sheet?
Yes, and of course you are involved in a project consortium, those that are meaningful to achieve your objectives, as long as that's possible. All right, next question. Nice to see John Hannon. Hi, John. I think you're still the NCP there. So where can I find a country-specific correction coefficients for unit cost? And
I can answer
and I
that.
asked, yes, they seem very difficult to find.
Yes, well, you need to go into portal. You need to go on the Horizon Europe work programs, and more in particular to the one for Marie Curie actions. And then if you go in that work program, you will find the rates towards the end. So maybe we can also see if we can put it in the presentation.
The link is there. The link is in the
Okay.
presentation.
Okay.
Yes.
So, voilà.
And you will get all the presentations and the recording of these sessions on the live website as well as on the event portal. So next one, I don't know who would like to take it. It's Bernd raising his finger. So does the LIFE program only support actions, or can it support a strategic plan for the city and then the action that will follow from this plan? Bernd.
I mean, we have quite a number of projects, running projects, where LIFE supports the development of local plans, local strategic plans, but then also implements actions. You have to find the right balance. When you read the priorities for climate action in particular for climate change adaptation, you will see that there is a certain support for the development of assessments and for plans. So of course you can submit a proposal under this, but we for the standard action project, we would like to see real implementation. And if the implementation only follows after the plan and remains very vague, the proposal will have to compete with those ones which include demonstration actions to show that certain activities really are being implemented. New will be the sustainable urban mobility plans, which are particularly referenced under climate change mitigation now under the transport and mobility sector. So also here, the development of those plans can be supported, but then followed by the implementation.
Thanks, Bernd. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on this. There will be, Fabio?
Yeah, maybe beyond climate, there are also relevant thematic areas in the circular economic and quality of life call related to implementation of strategic plans. So we recommend normally to have a look at the call priority topics, because there is indeed a possibility. Yeah.
And Anne also wants to come in.
Yeah, maybe just to add, I mean, to sort of round it out, if we look at the nature and biodiversity subprogram, very often one of the activities under the project would be development of management plans, for instance, for a species or an area, but that would not be the overall objective of the project. It's a component of the project. So I think, as Fabio said, you need to read very carefully all of the different topics that are in the call documents and make sure that you are addressing the objectives of the different topics and that you're producing what's expected for that topic, because it varies a little bit.
Indeed, and we will go more into the details of all of this in the next sessions, because tomorrow we will have really a session dedicated to climate action, to circular economy and quality of life, to nature and biodiversity. The day after will be particularly on clean energy transition. I know that there are also plans for cities play a role, and obviously on the session on strategic project this afternoon. So another question from Yelena, and it's not fully clear, but we can try to guess. Can the partner for the project be from the same country as the NGO? If she's talking about two different partners in the projects, one could be an NGO, one could be not a non-governmental organization. It's a bit cryptic, but apparently 7 people liked it, so they are also confused about this. I invite you perhaps to reformulate the question and put it again. But Anne, I see you thinking. You have an idea? No.
Well, no. I was actually thinking about something else that I'll come back to. But yeah, I mean, we do not have in most of the calls any nationality requirements for where the entities come from. You have heard that under CET there are certain requirements for some topics, and for the NGO operating grants, the NGO itself must be active and constituted in some way in at least 3 countries. But apart from that, it's not like under the Horizon program where you must for everything have, at least under lots of calls, you must have a distribution of countries. That we don't have. I was just my look on my face was because I was thinking more on the previous question on the plans. I think it's maybe just important to add that in the strategic projects, no, you cannot write the plan in the strategic project. A strategic project, the plan must already exist. In the strategic project, you're aiming for its implementation. So I don't know if that was part of the question, but I thought maybe that was important to add.
Yeah. Thank you. Question on cost, which is a mix of financial and technical content cost, actually, perhaps. So can you claim travel costs for people that are not project staff? For example, participants, speakers to an event? Anne,
well,
do you want to come
yes, of course, as long as these costs are in line with the normal eligibility criteria. So then whether it's project staff or non-project staff, this cost should be claimed under the travel cost category in the purchase cost.
Thanks. So the next one, please explain more the difference between beneficiaries and affiliated entities. Bernd,
this is a very, very big question.
Yes,
but I would say that best is to check the differences and what can be claimed as costs or how costs need to be reported. In the annotated grant agreement on page 13, you will have an overview of all the different type of participants with some guidance on what is possible, what is not possible. And on page 133, you will have further information on affiliated entities. So those are the ones with a capital or a legal link to the beneficiaries. They affiliated entities, they do not become part of the grant agreement, but they can incur costs. Of course, the beneficiaries to whom they relate will have to include these costs, because the affiliated entities will not be able to report and to budget these things themselves in the systems. They also need a validated PIC, and for the rest, I would say that the conditions for participation and for getting the funding, it's the same as for the beneficiaries. I think that is more or less a short summary, just to say that the beneficiary will always remain responsible for its affiliated entity. So also in case there are recoveries later on, in case we would have paid too much pre-financing, it will always go through the beneficiaries.
Thanks, Anne. I see the financial question are finding their ways with the likes and they're coming up. So the next one, I think it's for you as well. What happens if a person works in 2 EU projects exceeding the 215 days? For example, by working 14 hours per day.
Well, in any case, for all the EU projects together, only 215 days can be claimed. And this is very normal because the total salary cost to arrive at the daily rate are divided by 215 days. So if you would claim more than 215, you would have a profit. So therefore, you will need to decide which days you will declare in which project.
Thank you very much. So who would take the next one? I'm starting reading it. Do you plan a call for technical assistance project for capacity building of member states authorities this year? Hans, sorry, my H and my A, yes.
Will you go first?
No, it's for you, Hans.
For the capacity building straight. Yes, the answer is that this is planned, and it's for capacity building of member states authorities specifically to support the life program overall, and to help the national contact points to reach out to stakeholders in their member states and build capacity overall. So yes, that is planned, but the timelines are not yet issued.
Not yet set, but for that we will. It will also be published on the live website, so you will find it when it will be out. Okay, I don't know if this is for Fabio perhaps, but so is it eligible to purchase equipment that will be positioned only at one partner?
The short answer is yes. I mean, it's a bit too generic, so I don't know what the meaning if there is any meaning behind, but normally yes, there is nothing wrong. Why we would need it to put it elsewhere?
Yeah. Question on the questionnaire. I don't know if any one of us has the answer right now, but let's read it. How come you extended the maximum length of the B part of the application to 120 pages? The recent trend was to make them shorter, even 40 pages. Here we are talking with an expert of applications forms, apparently.
Depending on the call. So I think the strategic into the project, they do have large 120 pages, but I'm not aware that we extended the length for the others. I see Bernd, that is maybe you know.
Well, I mean, life is a colorful flower bouquet, and the 120 pages was a good compromise between more desire for lengthy proposals. I mean, we know that for nature biodiversity, we used to have larger proposals. For clean energy transition, the proposals were smaller. So that's a compromise. I mean, of course, you are not in the first. We have proposals. They're excellent, and we have single space in the proposal. I think the spacing of the lines should be taken. Proposal, if painful to read it because it's very difficult to read.
Thanks, Bernd. We're receiving messages on Slido that they don't hear you very well. So for the technical support team, if you can do something for Bernd Micro, please do. And perhaps when you talk, you can also push it to you better. And anyway, in the recordings, people will have the possibility to put the volume up. So perhaps that will also help. Salaries, I will give it to Anne Vermalen from Corinna Franzinelli. In Annex 1, how do you reflect two people working for the same organization, but with different salaries? An average of their salaries in the same line? What would you do?
Well, in the budget, I think that we only have one average monthly rate that is then used. So indeed, you will need to check what is the average for the persons that will be working on your grant. And then you use that average to budget all the person months that you would need in that proposal.
Thanks, Anne. I see that it's also already 12:27, so we are slowly coming to an end, and probably we will just be able to take the question that we see now on the screen. Are cascade grants eligible? Anne, I stay with you for this one.
Well, this is for financial support to third parties, and there you will need to consult the different calls, because for some calls it's eligible, for others it's not. So you will need to have a look for the call documents. And maybe can I quickly say something about the subcontracting, because I know that this is a very complex matter. So for a subcontract, this is the outsourcing of action tasks. This means that if you define the action tasks or the project tasks of your proposal, then if you outsource a full action task to a supplier, a service provider, then it will fall under subcontracting. If you contract part of the services that fall under an action task, then you should put it in purchase costs.
Thank you very much, Anne. I think we stay with you because there is this, which percentage of the first payment will be asked as financial guarantee?
This is 30%.
Thank you very much. And now we see again the same question. Is there an obligation for cross-border cooperation? Ans, I don't know if you want to repeat again that under CET, there are indeed certain topics.
Yes, I was thinking about that. That might be where the question comes from. As said, I mean, for standard action projects, this is not an obligation. Obviously, welcome to have multi-country programs and projects. But indeed, for most of the topics under the clean energy transition call, there will be an obligation to have several member states involved, and that means normally 3 beneficiaries from 3 different member states, or affiliated countries to the LIFE program.
Thank you very much. And with this, we have also answered the question that was there and is still there from Lucy. Is it necessary to have a foreign partner in project consortium? We can consider it answered. And it's 12:30 now. So I would suggest that we are very close to closing. Let's take this question from Mirel. And if there is any one of you that would like to take one of the 4 questions that it's there and you want to flag it to me, otherwise we would close. Some questions are really asking where to find specific elements, and perhaps you just need to go back and search better. And let me also remind you that you do have your national contact points that you can refer to guide you through the application process. If also watching the recordings, there are still information that you're missing. Okay, let's take Mirel and Miko, and the others we can take out, I would say. Nadia in the back office of Slido. So, Mirel, please explain the difference between A2 natural person for the budget categories and A4 natural person beneficiaries.
I can answer that.
Yes, thank you.
For the A2 type of persons, these are natural persons that have a direct contract with a beneficiary. This is like, for example, consultants that you hire. Then you have the natural person beneficiaries. These are natural persons participating as a beneficiary, because certain type of persons, they have their own company. So in that case, they fall under A4. It's the same as SME owner. So they then will have the unit rates.
Thank you very much, Anne. I see that Eva has joined us back. I'll leave the floor to her to tell you a few words about what is expecting us in the afternoon. And before that, I would like to thank all the speakers for being here with us. We know that there are other questions. Please consider the fact that we are not deleting your question. They are still there. You can still like them. We will have all the session in the afternoon today, specific on certain calls. But then tomorrow, we will really go into the different sub-programs, and the day after on clean energy transition. And there will be one extra additional question answer session. I will also be there moderating that. So we will really try to take everything that was not answered before that in this extra session to try to give you the best of our knowledge. Thank you very much. Thanks to everybody. And Eva, the floor is yours for the next couple of information.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Julia, for moderating this question and answer session. And thanks to all the panelists for their very insightful and useful replies. Yes, I just wanted to say that we will soon go for the lunch break. But before that, I would like to launch another Slido poll to ask you, our future applicants, what did you think about this first session on general and financial aspects of the life calls for proposals? So please go to Slido and check out this this poll. We really value your feedback, so we would really appreciate if you could answer also in order to improve for the future EU Life Information Days. And then I would just like to remind you that this afternoon we will start at 2 p.m. So we have more than 1 hour for our lunch break. And so we will come back here using the same link. And we are going to present you two types of calls for proposals this afternoon. The calls for proposals for strategic projects and the calls for proposals for technical assistance replication projects.